So here we are now on Wroxham Broad, and this broad is about 3/4 of a mile long, 1/4 of a mile wide at its widest point, and it covers about 120 acres. But now, while the rivers here are naturally formed, these large lakes that we call broads are all man-made and dug out by hand. And this digging left large, steep-sided pits with flat bottoms and straight edges that have now become hidden by all of the plants. And the amount of peat that was dug out here was the equivalent to 28,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. But now, during the medieval times, this area had a large population, a good supply of water, good land for farming, and then also a thriving wool industry. And since there was no coal available locally, the people then dug, dried and burnt the peat as a source of heating. And the idea of peat digging actually came across from the Viking invaders during the 9th century. And when the Vikings first settled here, they found that we were burning wood as our source of fuel. Now, they regarded wood too valuable for this and thought that it was best suited for the building of homes and also their longships. So they brought with them the knowledge that you could burn peat as a fuel. So beside the rivers in the marshland, they dug down around 8 foot, at which level lay brushwood peat. And now this was the ideal peat for burning. And so the local peat digging industry then started up here in Norfolk, and even after the Vikings had left our shores, it continued mainly under the control of the church. For it was the church who owned most of the land, but they were also one of the main users of the peat. And at this time, records indicate that Norwich Cathedral alone was burning around 400,000 bales of peat per year. 1500s, these pits had all but completely flooded. And what we were then left with were these large, stagnant pools of water. And because these pits had originally been dug so close to the rivers, so that the peat could have then been transported away easily via boats, all the locals then done was dug dikes from these flooded pits to the main rivers and then turned them into fishing grounds, mainly for eel fishing, and then that way at least these flooded pits could have still provided a source of food for the local area. But nowadays, as you will notice, the Broad's main purpose is now more of a recreational one.
Back in their car.
But I'll just stop in front of the boat now to the left-hand side. You will be able to see that there is quite a large sailing boat. But here on the Norfolk Broads, we do actually have 3 types of these wherries. Now, we have what are known as the wherry yachts, and these were built on a very similar sort of design to these pleasure wherries, but they were slightly shorter and about 2 foot narrower in the beam. And the wherry yachts were mainly built here for carrying passengers. We then have these pleasure wherries, which were built on exactly the same design as the existing trading wherries, but these were built here as people's personal boats. And there are two main types of wherry that you will hear about here on the Broads are the pleasure and also the trading wherries. And there were actually two main ways of telling these wherries apart. Now the first was by their name boards. And the pleasure wherries would have always carried a varnished name board with their names incised and then painted in gold, whereas the old trading wherries would have always carried a blue, cream or a red name board. And the second way to tell them apart is actually by their sails. Now, because the trading and also the pleasure wherries did have the same hulls and also the same rigging, but the pleasure wherries would have always carried a white sail, opposed to the old trading wherries' black sails. Now, these trading wherries that I have been talking about were essentially the HGVs of their time, and they were direct descendants of the Viking longships. Now, they were used here on the Broads for carrying cargo, and this was a job that they were very good at, and they could have actually carried their own weight. So, for instance, if you did have a 40-ton wherry about the same size as the Solus, now that could have carried a further 40 tons in cargo. So as the railways took over, the need for these wherries did decline, and unfortunately quite a lot of them were destroyed. But we did also sink a number of them next to the rivers to help shore up the riverbanks. And it is the sad case nowadays that out of the original 600 wherries, there are only 8 of them left. Now we do have 3 wherry yachts, we also have 3 of these pleasure wherries, but there are only 2 of the old trading wherries left here as well. Now the Alder and the Willow are both highly resistant to rotting, which enables them to withstand the very wet conditions here beside the river, and in fact most of their routes are actually underwater. But during the days of sail, trees were always discouraged from growing here on our riverbanks, since the tall trees would have then taken away the wind from the wherry sails. Now, when certain species of tree are cut down, including the willow and also the alder, they would then grow back again from the stumps. And the timber that regrows can then be harvested again in around 20 years' time. And this process is known as coppicing. And the trees that we have just over to our left-hand side were last coppiced during 1999 and then also in 2000. But the Norfolk reed will also absorb any of the wave energy from the passing boat traffic, which does make it a more natural alternative to piled key headings. Now, it's quite rare to see these out on the river, especially under full sail like this one is here. So we'll be coming past this fairly slowly, and that will be coming down the left-hand side of the boat in just a few moments' time.
It's only gone a mile and a half. We saw one of these before in Capital.
Well, just behind behind the trees to our right-hand side, but in a few moments in between some of the gaps in these trees, you will be able to get a little glimpse of Salhouse Little Broad. And during the summer months, this broad is covered by a mass of wild water lilies, which have yellow flowers, and they are an excellent indicator of water quality, as they will only grow in very clean waters. And these lilies have only started to reappear here on the Broads since the late 80s. And unfortunately, during the 60s and also the 70s, the Broads were quite polluted. And the main culprit of this was nitrates, but also phosphates that are found in sewage. But over the last 40 years, great efforts have been made to improve the water quality. As we do come along this bit of river here, just coming from the right-hand side, we have a couple of interesting boats just to point out to you. Now, the first one is the little red boat you'll see coming up in a few moments. Now, this is Wroxham and Salhouse's very own little ice cream boat that we do have patrolling around here in Broads. But also, not the big boat behind the ice cream boat, but the next one along is actually one of the river inspector launch boats that we do have here on Broads. You may remember earlier on the trip I did mention the Broads Authority and the river inspectors to you. Now, this is actually one of their launch boats coming up here on the right hand side in a few moments time. Behind the trees over to our left-hand side, we do now have one of our hidden Broads, and this is called Hopton Great Broad, and it is closed off to navigation, which means that no boats are actually allowed on there. Now, Hopton Great Broad is a nature reserve which is managed by Natural England, and it is part of the Buell Marshes National Nature Reserve. It does have quite good access from the land, and the village of Salhouse itself is only about a mile away, and it is reached via a public footpath that runs through the woods. As we do cruise down this end of Salhouse Broad, but also when we are back out on the main river, if we could once again just keep our eyes open, this time though we'll be looking for a lovely, elegant waterbird with white breast feathers and then also a sort of an orangey colorisation to the back of its head. And this is the Great Crested Grebe. Now, we do generally have to be fairly quick with these grebes because you will notice that they do tend to dive a lot. Now, they will do this to feed, but they would also do this to escape, and they prefer diving to flying. And during the springtime, these grebes have an elaborate courtship display. And what you will see them do is rise themselves up out of the water, and then they start shaking their heads. And apart from the swan, the grebe is the only bird here that will carry her young on her back for the first 6 to 8 weeks, just to keep them out of the way of any predators. These grebes were mainly being shot and then killed for their head feathers, which were then being used on women's headgear. Now, as a result of this shooting, the grebe numbers here in Norfolk declined. But thankfully the protection that was offered to them on certain private Broads, and also the protection acts that were put in place by our government, helped to save the great crested green as a Norfolk breeding bird. Salhouse Broad itself was formed through the extraction of gravel during the 9th century, and it then became an open area of water during the medieval times when it was flooded by the river. And this Broad is around 32 acres in size, and it has many habitats including open water, alder-carr woodland, grassland, and then also an ancient woods. And this Broad is owned by a Mr. Henry Cater. Now he leased it to the Broads Authority for 21 years, but took back management of the Broad in 2003. He then employed a countryside ranger to manage the site, and also installed water pipes for the availability of the visiting hire craft.
Sweet.